I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us a brand new guest. He's an economist. He's an entrepreneur. He's a published author, a best-selling author, as a matter of fact. This book came out in August when the market was peaking. The Age of Anomaly. I'm talking about Andrei Polgar. Andrei Polgar, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com from Romania.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me, Greg, and thank you everyone for watching.
Well, I got to tell you, when your book came out, it was around August, and the markets were peaking. So, we didn't really have this big sell-off, this peak in October, and the sell-off into the end of last year, and actually beginning of this year. Now it's kind of leveled off for now. What's your appraisal now? What's going on? I mean, let's just start with your book, The Age of Anomaly. And I want to start with your turkey story that, a turkey has 1,000 days of a good life, then all of a sudden it's over. Then one day it's over, just like Forrest Gump. Tell me about The Age of Anomaly. What's the premise of the book?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, people have been congratulating me for the timing, having released it in August, and we all know what happened afterwards. But truth be told, it doesn't really matter that much. What matters more is just kind of realizing the unsustainable nature of our system. And I do like referring to Nassim Taleb's Turkey analogy, which is essentially a situation of ergodicity versus non-ergodicity. Or to simplify it, the problem with our system is that it works great and we all enjoy these amazing benefits until it doesn't. Think of it as me only having $1,000 to my name and betting with a rich friend on a simple coin toss, heads or tail, the winner doubles his money. I can be very lucky and 5 times in a row guess the right outcome. So essentially I'm going to go 2,000, 4,000, 8, and so on. The problem is the 6th time, because there is this risk of ruin, I get it wrong, and it doesn't matter that I've done so well up until that point. I'm ruined. I don't have anything else. So essentially, the sequence goes kind of like this: $2,000, 4, 8, 16, 32, 0, 0, 0, 0. And therein lies the problem that people need to understand. The situation we find ourselves in is precisely the situation illustrated by Nassim Taleb's Turkey analogy, and that, of course, a turkey that's fed each and every day by its owners is very happy, and everything that happens to it reinforces the turkey's idea that humans are the most amazing creatures ever. Until one day when Thanksgiving comes along, and we all know how that ends.
So are we? I got to tell you, I got a letter from actually it's just a short note from a viewer, and he says we pray folks who are comfortably unaware will become aware of what's happening in our nation and our world. Comfortably unaware. Are people comfortably unaware of what's coming?
I think it's even worse in that up until this point, of course, you've had people talk about perfect storm type situations, but I think one element was missing. And right now, after so many years, and you've mentioned this on other interviews as well, after so many years since the Great Recession, not only are people comfortably unaware, but even worse yet, the entire idea of financial preparedness has been discredited because I've noticed this. I've been on many, many shows promoting my book in the second part of last year, including shows on entrepreneurship communities, so people not necessarily interested that much in financial preparedness. And a common element was always this, people have made predictions, they didn't pan out. Then other analysts came, they've made gloomy predictions, those didn't pan out. So now the general public has essentially been numbed. And one of the biggest issues I find myself facing when I talk about what my book is all about, sustainable financial preparedness, it's a tough sell. And it's a tough sell because people are even worse than just, ignorant in an uncomfortable way. They're downright dismissive of anything that has to do with financial preparedness. So on top of all of the problems that exist with our economy, on top of the political issues that you guys are certainly well aware of as well, we also have this general state of not even apathy, even worse, contempt or this complete disconsideration when it comes to the idea of financial preparedness in general. So if there's ever been a perfect storm type situation, this is it, because this has been one of the major missing elements in my view.
Do you think that the year is going to get better as the year goes on? It looks like the stock market has leveled off. I mean, you're a guy that's in Romania. You watch the whole world. You've traveled a great deal. You've done a lot of interviews and things like that. What's your prediction for the rest of the year? What do you think? What do you see happening after this big, I don't know, a 15-18% drop in the stock market?
Well, it's definitely significant, especially as a trader when you think about the fact that market structure was broken. Now, of course, there's always this issue that the market can stay irrational for longer than you can stay solvent. Like people might remember back in the day, you had people like Kyle Bass who very eloquently explained what was going on in Japan, how unsustainable things are over there in Japan, and you listened to him, and it all made perfect sense. And it seemed like shorting Japanese government bonds was the perfect trade. Well, it just so happens that they now call that trade the Widowmaker because it didn't exactly age well. So one of the top things I believe, and I'm saying this more so as an investor or even occasional trader, not necessarily just as an economist, you have to understand that the market can stay irrational for a long period of time. And if your strategy doesn't revolve around somehow, incorporating this level of uncertainty in it, and if you just have a, fundamental hypothesis and you need it to materialize right away, then you're in trouble. So as far as the end of the year is concerned, while it is significant whenever market structure is broken and whenever an advance like the one we had in the stock market, the beginning of an even parabolic type advance, when that type of structure has been reached, then yeah, from a technical analysis perspective, that's problematic. Do I discount the possibility of the market going back up? No, I do not. But essentially, even if it does, people watching this should just count their blessings, because I've made this point time and time again, especially on communities not like this one, where people weren't as aware of how important it is to be prepared. And they asked me, okay, you wrote this book, you're promoting it all over the place, because what? Because you fear the market's going to crash? And I tell them, no. I'm a hands-on economist. I don't just study asset classes, I actively trade them. I do anything from local real estate stuff here in Romania to sometimes even trading cryptocurrencies on leverage. So I'm not the type of person who is easily spooked by volatility. Time and time again, I explain to everyone that a market crash is cyclical. Of course, we're going to have one. And I'm not afraid of the idea of a market crash per se. I'm afraid of what happens when the chain is broken. Or to put it differently, when the status quo no longer works. Because this is a situation where your reader's comment about us being, comfortably ignorant makes perfect sense. Because yeah, people kind of know that every now and then there are financial crashes, but in their mind, there's this idea, because hey, it worked during the dot-com bubble, it quote unquote worked when it comes to the Great Recession. So in their mind, there's this idea that yeah, there's going to be a crash, people are going to panic, but central banks and governments are going to have it all under control. In the minds of central bankers and those in government, the same thing. Yeah, the market's going to crash, but we're going to just give people more of the same, and hopefully that's going to work. That's what keeps me up at night. What happens when that chain breaks? Not your average, business cycle, market crash. No, that's perfectly fine.
Well, you're saying that are you saying that you see it's the next time, no matter when that is, are you thinking it's worse this time? I mean, the global debts, I've brought this up many times to different people, was 165 trillion in '08, and now it's 250 trillion dollars, and there's an exponent on that with derivatives and everything else, and the bonds are no good, and Europe is printing money like crazy to buy everything in sight, and they say they're going to cut that off. Are you saying that we're set up that this next time the way it looks is worse than any other time in the past?
I am definitely saying that because our
And
main
why? Why are
problem.
you saying that? Why are you saying it's the next crash is going to be worse than anything we've ever seen? Why?
Well, first and foremost, because problems have kept accumulating. And nowadays, we've come to accept the unsustainable as status quo. We look at Japan with a debt to GDP ratio of over 200% and say, hey, it's all fine. We look at Italy with 130-ish, hey, it's fine. We look at France, Belgium, the United States with around 100% debt to GDP, it's fine. From 1913 up until the Great Recession, and people can Google it, I encourage them to just Google US monetary base and look at the chart themselves. It's very powerful. Up until the Great Recession, 840-ish billion dollars had, the monetary base reached that level.
That's actual real cash, dimes, nickels, quarters, dollars, tens, twenties,
Exactly.
hundreds. Okay. The actual
Exactly.
physical cash in hand. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
What happened after the Great Recession, and just to let that sink in for a bit, what happened after the Great Recession was quote unquote printing money, pumping money into the system to the tune of, in the United States at the height of QE, 85 billion per month, in the European Union at the height of their QE, even more so. But in the US, let's stick to the US, we're talking about 85 multiplied by 12, about $1 trillion per year. So you have a monetary base from 1913 up until the Great Recession of 840-ish billion dollars, and then you pump up to 1 trillion per year into the system, bringing it to $4 trillion or thereabouts at the highs, and now we're at approximately, if memory serves me well, 3.5 trillion or so. Once again, we are just accepting the unprecedented as status quo. So that's one thing. Another thing is that, as people have noticed, each time something more substantial needed to be done. Back in the days of the aftermath of the dot-com bubble, lowering interest rates to 1%, something huge back in the day, okay, they did it, it quote unquote worked, the day was saved. Then the Great Recession came along. Came along. Interest rates, at least they got a chance to grow, not exactly to their previous levels, but hey, the 5.25% or something along those lines, perfectly fine. But lowering them to 1% was not enough. They had to lower them to zero and pump, as everyone knows, a ton of money into the system. Next time, look at where interest rates are now. And of course, even if they would manage to go up some more, something even more dramatic would need to be done. What? I don't know. Maybe they would bring interest rates down to negative 2% or negative 1%, and instead of pumping 1 trillion per year, they would pump 3 trillion per year. Nobody can guarantee that next time it's going to break. But it's a matter of just simple elementary logic to realize that this is not a universal panacea. You cannot do it indefinitely. Because yeah, even with interest rates at zero, people are complacent and they're probably not going to take money out of the bank. If you lower them to negative 1%, maybe you're going to have 5% of the population that says, you know what, wait a second, I want my money, give me my money. If you lower them to negative 1.5%, you're going to maybe have 10%. If you lower them further, you're going to have 15%, 15, 20%. This is where the banking system starts to break. Because let's be honest, if 1 in 4 depositors were to ask for his money back, I don't care how robust that bank is, it's effectively insolvent. So for all of these reasons, it's a matter of simple logic to understand that yes, next time is going to be worse. And two, while nobody can guarantee that the system is going to break next time, things are already at such a ridiculously unsustainable level that I believe it's wise to err on the side of caution when it comes to these things.
Well, what do you think about the trade war, the trade imbalance with the China? Grassley came out here, Charles Grassley, senator here in America, and said, well, we've made very little progress in any kind of trade dispute with China. They had a ceasefire. What do you think about that? What do you think about, or on your side of the pond, over in Europeans, you are in Romania, that, Draghi has announced that he's not going to be buying all this debt over there. We've had to. The whole thing, the whole system is a fraud. What do you think about our trade war? Number one, number two. What do you think about Europe and the banks over there and the yellow vest wanting to have a bank run in Italy, having terrible banking problems and Draghi not buying? Let's start over here in America. What about the trade war? And let's work over to Europe.
Okay, first and foremost, obviously the elephant in the room when it comes to the United States and its relationships is China. A lot of people talk about Russia, about the economy of Russia, as if, oh my God, it's such yeah, sure, it's a large economy, but it's an economy kind of probably between, in terms of GDP, between the GDP of Spain and the GDP of Italy, just to put things into perspective. Whereas China, yeah, that's the elephant in the room. And in our interconnected world, it's always hard to determine what happens in such a situation. But historically speaking, whenever these types of tensions emerge and whenever these types of tensions lead to currency wars initially, trade wars afterwards, nothing good happens. While past performance is now not necessarily indicative of future results, it is significant that historically speaking, this leads to no good. And I'm glad you brought the topic of Europe, because over here, we have a major problem. Generally speaking, in any country, and it's one of the reasons why the force that's keeping us on an unsustainable trajectory is so strong, it's because generally speaking, it's hard to sell balance. It's hard to sell pain. It's hard to sell people, okay, maybe we need to suffer a bit more so that in the long run, our children can be better off. That's always a tough sell. But if you want to sell something like that, like Emmanuel Macron tried to do, and very timidly, compared to the problems France has, if you try to do that with a population such as that of France, then even now, when for better or worse, yeah, markets are correcting, yeah, there are problems, but nothing's burning right now. Yet you see what kind of backlash there is in France. You see all of these pent-up tensions that are surfacing right now in France. Some of you might remember what happened also in France during the Great Recession, where you had, CEOs kidnapped and stuff like that. Just ask yourself, if things are so bad over there now, and it's just, you can consider it a canary in the gold mine, what's happening now with the yellow vest in France. If things are this bad right now, when for better or worse, nothing's burning, what do you think is going to happen when we're going to have to deal with all our problems, when we're going to have to deal with the unsustainable nature of our system? Things are already unbelievably bad. Here in Europe, we are buried under excessive bureaucracy. We have, for the most part, a pretty spoiled population. And this is true for other Western nations as well. I'm actually, to be perfectly honest, as a Romanian, if things were to genuinely break down, I'm frankly more worried about what people in the Western world would do to cope with it than I am for people in Romania. Because at least growing up here, for better or worse, us Romanians have gone accustomed to the idea that systems sometimes fail. Back when I was growing up, we frequently didn't have heating. That's why, as a child, I promised myself that when I grow up, I'm going to buy a fireplace. Back in Romania, water shortages were a real thing. So at least we understand that systems fail. Whereas in the Western world, when it comes to way too many individuals, they're just getting by as it is. They're overly indebted. They're overly dependent on the system functioning flawlessly. And if something, even if a small crack appears, then these people will not be able to cope with it. They just won't.
What do you think would happen? I mean, your darkest nightmares. What do you think would happen? That's a pretty good point. That in Romania, I mean, you were born when Ceausescu's. They were evil people, and they were fired. They were killed with a firing squad, and people had a lottery, and everybody hated them so bad they wanted to be on that firing line to kill them. So that's how bad it got in Romania. So that's a good point. You say that we are used to systems failing. What's your darkest fear about systems failing in the UK or France or Germany or in the United States? What's your fear? What do you think would happen? Would we have a Mad Max scenario?
Well, personally, it depends. I wouldn't venture to say we're going to go in Mad Max territory too soon. And frankly, despite what I just said about Romania, I do believe that the problems are going to get worse from bottom to top. In that initially, when the system breaks, people are going to, as usual, find refuge in US government bonds and your traditional safe haven assets. So, at least initially, the dynamic is going to be bottom to top one. Let me just remind everyone that back when things were really bad in Argentina, if memory serves me well, its debt to GDP ratio was not that high compared to many countries right now. It was something like 60%. But it doesn't matter. If markets get spooked and if markets no longer want to give you money, you have a problem. And the same thing I envision happening when it comes to a collapse of our system. Initially, even if the problems emerge from a Western nation, the first reaction is going to be a bottom to top one, and that you're going to have companies repatriate capital. They're going to take capital out of countries like Romania, out of emerging markets, and into safe haven assets. And then the house of cards is going to essentially unravel in such a manner. So um, as bad as things are, even in the United States and in a lot of developed countries, unfortunately, I see much more pain initially in weaker countries in emerging markets and so on.
When you're saying taking capital home, that's kind of what Donald Trump just did in his tax plan. He repatriated all this capital, a couple of $2 or $3 trillion, got brought back to the United States. So the United States looks pretty good right now. Is that what you're talking about? That people just sucking capital into the core, and people buying treasuries, and so the last card, the last place that will fold, looks like will be something like the United States. Is that right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. While the system itself is in terrible shape, I do have to say that yeah, developed countries like the United States will of course be the last to fall. And in my baseline scenario that I'm afraid of, whether it happens next or if we're good for another cycle remains to be seen. But the baseline scenario I'm afraid of is having our usual exogenous shock, our usual market crash, followed by a loss of confidence in the ability of central banks and governments to keep it under control. So to simplify it, it would be a case of deflation first, followed by a loss of control that ultimately leads to an inflationary spiral. But even when it comes to that inflationary spiral, people need to understand that it depends. Unlike other economists, I wouldn't be so quick to accept, rapid hyperinflation taking over in the United States, for example. No. The weaker a country is, the more prone to hyperinflation it can be considered. The same way in the 90s, my country, Romania, had massive inflation. But even we didn't have hyperinflation as in taking wheelbarrows of cash to the store. So for better or worse, at least there's no historic precedent that I know of a powerful country going from being a top economy to suffering from hyperinflation right away. And if people are quick to say Germany after World War II, no. Because Germany, back when they had a problem with hyperinflation, that was not a strong country. That was a country that was devastated, that was weakened by the Versailles Treaty, by having to pay all of that money back, and not even being allowed to use its own currency. It has to pay back in an internationally accepted currency or in gold. That led to its problems and so on. So for better or
Was that in World War I or World War II?
no, it was after World War One.
Yeah,
People
World War
wanted
One.
yeah.
Yeah,
After the Versailles
yeah,
Treaty.
World War I. You said World War II, but it's World War
Oh
One.
yeah. So sorry. Yeah.
That's
World War
what
One.
that's what caused the Weimar Republic. The Rentenmark took over. All this hyperinflation. But you're saying
Yeah.
that a country like the United States, because this is USA Watchdog, you're saying I don't think we're going to get hyperinflation. I mean, maybe inflation, but you think we'll get deflation first. I've heard that before too.
There is, in my opinion, for someone who's living in the United States, you have much more stringent things to worry about than hyperinflation. So,
Like
am I
like what?
saying
Like
I am?
like like what?
Because
What should people in the United States be worried about? Not hyperinflation, but what should we be worried about?
you should be worried about whatever it is that could weaken your country so that in the end it becomes weak enough to be a good quote unquote candidate for hyperinflation. This can mean people deciding, and we're already seeing signs of that, and it's perfectly natural for things to happen in that way. You know, a tendency more and more to circumvent the dollar, a tendency more and more, perhaps it's going to be something exogenous that nobody expected related to the US economy. But again, your line of thinking, in my view, and it's a view that's backed by history, even though there are no guarantees, but my view is this. For you to be a candidate for hyperinflation, your country needs to get a lot weaker. So your energy at this point is best spent worrying about whatever it is that could make your country so weak that it becomes a candidate for hyperinflation. When it comes to countries like Romania, of course, things change. But even here, we're members of the European Union. Perhaps hyperinflation is a term that's too strong. And, we're looking at something like really, really massive inflation, but not hyperinflation. So I just think people need to have to understand that historically speaking, this is the most likely sequence. The country getting weakened, and only then do you have reasons to worry about hyperinflation.
What about all this debt that we have out here? Obviously the world's worried about it. There's a really good reason to say that you're not going to get paid back all this debt. And when we grew the debt to 250 trillion from 150 trillion, then you add in all the derivatives. I think Egon von Greyert said if you add up the total debt picture and commitments, we're talking about 2,000 trillion, and they're never getting paid back. So, do you worried about, or do you foresee some sort of a big currency reset, a debt reset before bad things happen? Do you see a currency reset before bad things happen?
Well, ultimately, it all depends on what the market wants. Because at the end of the day, the dollar is what it is today because people want to hold the dollar, countries want to hold the dollar. And even if, of course, on your show, you've mentioned situations like Russia selling treasury bills to buy Chinese yuan and stuff like that. Of course, these things are happening, but for better or worse, a lot of people still want to hold the dollar. Should that change, then yeah, there will be no choice but to do something about it, either in the form of a default, telling people, look, this is unsustainable, your debt's not going to be paid off, let's figure it out, let's make a deal and give you a haircut or whatever. Or, of course, you're going to get paid back, but you're going to get paid back in a dollar that's worth a lot less.
So I hate to interrupt you. You don't see a currency reset coming. A lot of people on my era think that there's a big currency reset, but you're not. I mean, the IMF has talked about a reset, Christine Lagarde for years. But you're right now, as an economist, you're saying, I don't see a reset happening anytime soon. That's what am I getting that right? You don't see a reset happening anytime soon?
That realistically speaking, it is cyclical. A reset of some sorts in the monetary system, like the collapse of Bretton Woods and so on, it is cyclical in nature. So more likely than not, something like that is going to happen. But it all depends on the manner in which control is lost over the economy. So will there be a complete currency reset? Will there be a completely new monetary system that's unlike anything we have so far? Or will it be a bridge monetary system? Will it be yet another progression towards something that generations away is going to look remarkably different from what we have? Ultimately, it depends because markets can be fickle. Markets can be fickle. Love it or hate it, the system we have now exists in its form, and I include the monetary system in this, because people want it to exist. Democracy, for example, is not a natural state. You don't see it in packs of wolves. Democracy is something that if people stop believing in it, it stops existing. It's not like the law of gravity. If you say, I'm going to stop believing in the law of gravity and you jump off a bridge, it's not going to end well for you. The same is not true when it comes to democracy. Our current system is essentially just a figment of our imagination. It's just consensus. It's just us agreeing to live our lives in this way. To give you two completely opposite examples, you have like 1776, 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence, which talks about about liberty, about all of that awesome stuff. And then you have rough approximation 1776, let's say before Christ, where you have the Code of Hammurabi, where it says, oh, we don't care about liberty that much. We have 3 classes of citizens, yada, yada, yada. in the exact essentially it could be considered the exact opposite of the Declaration of Liberty in some ways. But our system is what it is, whether it's Hammurabi or whether we're talking about the Declaration of Independence, because we believe in it. As you all know, as everyone knows, currencies are no longer backed by anything tangible. They exist because we want them to exist. The dollar is the reserve currency because we want the dollar to be the reserve currency. It is possible that after an exogenous shock, your business as usual financial crisis, the loss of control I'm afraid of will also entail a loss of confidence in not just dollars, but currencies in general. Should that happen, then yes, I am definitely not discounting the possibility of a currency reset. The IMF, as you've pointed out, has plans in place when it comes to that. They just say, hey, we're going to replace this entire thing with the SDR and maybe people are going to accept it. But if people lose confidence in the status quo, it might even be a stretch to assume they're going to accept a solution that's going to be proposed to them by the IMF, which is the epitome of status quo. So essentially, when preparing for financial calamities, what sets me apart from other economists is that I embrace my incompetence. Or in other words, I go by the assumption that nobody can know for sure what happens next, and those who believe they know for sure, in my view, they're just deluding themselves, So you just have to see things from a perspective of being willing to cope with the fact that some things just cannot be predicted. Because to go back to my baseline scenario, deflation first, followed by loss of control, which among other things leads to an inflationary spiral. A quick reaction to this would be, hey, just buy some precious metals and you'll be good to go. And it is correct, except what if you need to transfer a lot of wealth abroad? And there are capital controls like what happened over in Cyprus back in 2013. In that case, if you think you can cross the border with today's technology holding a bunch of precious metals on you, it's going to be a bit difficult. So when it comes to such situations, maybe it makes sense to have at least a small portion of your wealth invested in Bitcoin that you can carry on your person by only remembering a 12 word sequence. And that's it. You have control over your wallet. Fair enough, great. But what if all of this loss of control leads to all sorts of political instability, which bring about a fragmentation of the internet, with the US having its internet, the European Union having its internet, and so on? In that case, I would much rather be holding precious metals in my hand than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is going to be a lot harder to use logistically. What about cash flow? What about having something like, income-producing properties that, for example, I own some here in Romania, and if things go bad in the economy, my rental income is basically going to take a hit, but it's still going to exist. So what I'm trying to explain to people is that the situation, the equation, is so complex, it has so many variables, that it's, in my view, it's extremely risky to try to predict. Instead, my advice, and I give this advice in my book, again, this is why it's different to many of the other books written by economists, I focus less on predicting and more on not just accepting my incompetence, but making it a core pillar of my strategy. I have no idea what happens next. I can make an educated guess. I can outline a few fears and whatnot, but at the end of the day, in my opinion, of course, there's absolutely no alternative to having an incompetence-proof system in place. In my humility, if people are to remember just one word after our conversation today, in my opinion, it would be this: humility. If you have the humility it takes to accept your inability to predict the future, and if you make sure your strategy revolves around it, I think in the long run you're going to be in good shape. If you're not, then I believe the market's probably going to humble you in the end.
Bruce Lee said one time, was in a commercial I saw it, he says, you have to train every muscle in your body because you never know what you're going to need in a fight. And that's kind of what you're saying, right? You're saying y'all need a little bit of everything. You need to be able to go any direction, any way. You need to have Bitcoin, gold, cash, food, water, stuff paid for, rental income. You need everything.
You need, to the best of your ability, a little bit of everything. Because I would have loved nothing more than to have like a really short book, quick to the point. People love reading short books, and my editors hate me for writing this book, which is like 400 plus pages long with a bunch of footnotes and a ton of research behind it and all that. But I see no other way. I see no other way. Of course, not
Well,
everyone
explain
can.
that. You see no other way than what? So, is that right? You need a little bit of everything. You see no other way. Explain what is that you see no other way of.
I see no other way than putting in the work, which is why in my book I take things one asset class at a time, from your traditional ones like stocks, real estate, whatnot, to exotic ones like Bitcoin, like domain names. I'm probably the only economist who even studies domain names as an asset class. So I give people the big picture about each asset class. I tell them what I think, what the science behind it is, what it's all about, and in the end, I help them figure out their own strategy. Will everyone watching us be able to put together a real estate portfolio? No. But maybe you can make a goal of having one income producing property or paying off your home or something along those lines. Then you can maybe also buy a bit of Bitcoin. Then you need precious metal exposure as well. Yeah, you do need a plan that enables you to land on your feet. I don't offer people quick fix type solutions. I don't, if people are looking into buying my book because I have a magic formula that's going to make them rich no matter what, no. The name of the game, especially given the times we live in, is putting in the work and understanding that it's on you. The decision of what you should invest in, how you should invest, if there's anything you should not outsource to me, to Greg, or anyone else, it's this decision. It's on you to do it. And that's why my book ended up being so long. That's why I've given so many historic case studies of things that went wrong in the past. That's why I give people so much information about each asset class. It's not just because I want to make a book that's so thick that you can work out your biceps with it. It's because there's no other way than to put in the work and, again, embrace your incompetence. And contrary to popular belief, embracing your incompetence takes a lot of work.
And you would agree with that. You need a little bit of everything. You need to be able to go in any direction at any time because you don't really know how this is really going to shake out.
In my honest opinion, yes. Maybe if you bet it all on just one card on one scenario, you might get lucky. But when it comes to your family's welfare, when it comes to all of these things, do you really want to leave it to chance? I do believe that yes. To the best of your ability, based on your situation, of course. Some people have enough capital at their disposal to be able to build a robust portfolio in a very meaningful way. Other people are just going to wing it, and to the best of their ability, which is what I help people do in the book, try to diversify. But yeah, for the love of God, please don't be a one-trick pony.
I had a PhD economist, William Black, on, and I said, "Could you give me some?" This is pretty amazing for a PhD economist, expert in law, white collar crime, and he's a legal scholar as well. I said, "What can little people do?" He says, "Save money and don't get into debt." I mean, say have some savings, stay out of debt. Basically, it got down to that. Should that be your core principle? Is to stay away from debt?
Well, I have to say
For little
that
people,
given
for poor people, stay out of debt. I'm talking about little people like me. Stay out of debt. Would that be a good advice if you can't do much of anything else? Just get yourself out of debt.
Well, I do have to say that personally, I've never been in debt. I've been dirt poor, like by Romanian standards, but I've never been in debt, and I built everything up from there. So, what I would tell to people would be this: understand that life is going to serve up some punches, and that there are no solutions that are going to guarantee you're going to do well. I'm a hands-on guy. I'm an entrepreneur. I started making a bunch of money back when I was in high school. And I was always a very careful saver. I was never one to spend on stuff I didn't need, so I saved almost all of my money. I made a lot of money, I saved a lot of money, and I ended up losing all my money. Why? Because two things happened in my case. One, life happened. My mom got sick, and I had to take her to another country with a better medical system to get all the treatment she needed to get well. And needless to say, that was a huge financial shock. And two, on top of it all, The Great Recession came and business slowed down as a result, making matters even worse. No matter, again, humility is the operative word. No matter how hard you try to prepare, no matter what you do, you need to understand that when things go bad, it's not going to be pretty. So that's one thing. Stay out of debt, and that's always good advice. I would add to that. Because the most common question I get from people is, okay, I don't have a lot of money at my disposal. What should I invest in? The investment most people overlook, strangely enough, is investments in themselves. Now, if I just look at what the returns have been whenever I acquired a new skill, whenever I invested in myself in a meaningful way, the return on investment has always been staggering. So yeah, try to live a balanced life, invest in yourself, do your best to get out of debt if you can, or at least minimize debt if that is not possible. But four, once again, even this is not enough. Even this is not enough. Even if you read my book religiously, even if you implement absolutely everything I say in this book, there still can be no guarantees. I know based on my experience in life that things can get tough even when you are financially responsible. So as a word of advice for people who watch USA Watchdog, because I know they're financially responsible people, that's why I feel so much empathy for this audience. They need to understand that there are never guarantees. Even if you do the right thing, when disaster strikes, more likely than not, it will not be pretty for you. The only thing you can do is try your best to put your life on a sustainable path. I did the right thing, so at least I was able to provide for my family and make sure everything turned out all right. I had this huge privilege. I ended up landing on my feet. That should be people's goal. Way too many people, especially those who are well prepared, approach the idea of financial crisis situations with a bit of a schadenfreude mentality, in that they say, oh, I'm prepared, I've done everything I needed to do, I cannot wait for financial crisis situations to come because it's all going to be so. No. When things happen, it's going to be awful. Maybe because you're going to have a tough streak, maybe because you're going to see people around you suffer. It is what it is. It's awful. I believe there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it from happening. What you can do is, to the best of your ability, make sure you land on your feet. I really wish I could be more optimistic. I know people love easy fix type solutions, but I'm always in the business of selling the exact opposite of that.
Andrei Polgar, what a great new guest. You basically promise nothing and say, get ready for, the worst case scenario, and you need a little bit of everything, basically, is what you said, what you're telling people. The book is this, The Age of Anomaly. I'll just go full screen here. The Age of Anomaly, it's a great book. It's a best-selling book. It's a New York Times Wall Street Journal,
Yeah.
and USA Today. Best-selling book, Age of Anomaly. It's the cover art. I'm sorry I don't have the book. I know you sent it to me, but we had a little failure in the mailing process, which is not your fault. But I'm telling you, I was fascinated to hear what you had to say. It was really good. It's no wonder why this book is a best-selling book and is done so very well. But storm clouds look like they're coming, right?
They are coming. There's nothing you can do about it. I hope people manage to extract value from our conversation, in that they incorporate at least a little bit of something that I've said today into their strategy. I do wish them all the best because they're in it for all the right reasons. USA Watchdog viewers just want to protect their families. They're not in it for the most, the percentage of people here on this channel that's in it just, to protect the people they love and things of that nature tends to be extremely high compared to other communities. And for this reason, if there's ever a demographic that deserves to land on its feet, it's you guys. So hopefully you liked the things we've discussed today. You found stuff useful, and I wish you all the best.
Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan. To your point about, people waiting for a collapse to come. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely, Greg.
And so, what a great talk. Andrei Polgar, thank you for joining us today on USA Watchdog. The book, I'll put up links for this, is The Age of Anomaly. Andrei, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I didn't know what I was going to get with this, but I I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I suspect you'll be getting a lot of thumbs up for your attitude and your good nature. Thank you, Andre, for joining us today on USA Watchdog.
Take
Hope
care,
you come
Greg.
back. Yes, sir.
Bye-bye, guys.